We made a very limited amount of t-shirts, I think for our 20th anniversary, and we gave away literally like 10 shirts. For our 30th anniversary, which was in 1995, I go, we are now gonna market. Let's sell shirts, let's have some merch. So I had a list of people, almost 400 people that we were gonna invite to our 30th anniversary. So anyway, I make our biggest order ever. I drove to Santa Cruz to get the shirts, and I pick up the shirts, I go, bro, I can't pay for this. He goes, what do you mean? The shirts are wrong. So the design was messed up, and he didn't notice, and he goes, oh my God, well, he couldn't afford to take the loss. I couldn't afford to pay for the shirts because they weren't right. So we make a deal, and we go, look, he will put the names of these 400 people on each shirt, and we'll give them away to customers that are personalized, and I'll just be in it for the cost of the shirt. So he ended up doing the job for free, and then we redid shirts in a new way, and they were perfect. But about a month later, his girlfriend, who he lived with and where he had all his silk screen equipment at, breaks up with him, kicks him out, and goes, all of this shit's going in the garbage. Do something. So he comes to me and he goes, would you like to buy silk screening equipment? And I go, of course not. I need silk screening equipment like I need a hole in my head. I'll teach you. Because he had to get it out really fast. I ended up buying all this crap, and he set it up in my mother's garage, and he slowly taught me how to silk screen. So now I'm in the silk screen business. And then I ended up just literally producing probably maybe 100,000 shirts that we've given away in our history. We love added value. So you order a picture of the tequila we are promoting that week or that day, and we'd give you a t-shirt with that picture. So it's like a huge discount, but it doesn't cost anybody anything. And people love that. And people started collecting shirts, and people started reselling the shirts. I mean, it's crazy. And now we love, again, being part of not just the San Francisco hospitality community, the San Francisco bar community, but the international bar community, the international restaurant community, being part of the city of San Francisco and of Mexico, so that when we go, you know, you may enjoy a Tommy's Margarita in Bulgaria, but if we can give you a t-shirt from our restaurant, we think it's really nice, and if you wear it, we're grateful. For our 60th anniversary, we will be doing pop-ups all over the world, and hopefully handing out Tommy's t-shirts to as many people as we can.
In 2003, I came from working in London to spending some time with Julio Bermejo. Spent 6 months here in San Francisco at Tommy's Mexican restaurant, where I would help him with odd jobs, squeezing lime, making t-shirts, buying produce, but every day learning from him, learning about, you know, the many bottles behind the bar, the producers, the families, and he really opened my eyes to the world of wonderful tequila. And then, shortly after that, a collaboration with Pernod Ricard to create a great value for money quality tequila called Altos. So I owe Julio and his family a lot. This for me is certainly one of my favorite bars in the world. I keep coming back here. It's considered the Mecca for tequila.
My name is Julio Bermejo. I'm the beverage manager here at my family's restaurant, Tommy's Mexican restaurant in San Francisco, California. I'm also the creator of the Tommy's Margarita, as well as the ambassador of tequila to North America, as appointed by the CNIT. One of my earliest memories and greatest memories and life experiences and business lessons was taught to me by my father when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And back then, the restaurant still had the same layout that it has 60 years later, right? So our pantry has always been in the back. we've always had a kitchen that's open and visible to the public in the front of the restaurant. And one day, I happened to be in the restaurant. I don't know where my brothers and sisters were that particular moment, but my father asked me to go to the back, to go to the pantry area, and bring him some tomatoes. Now, I'm 6 or 7, I am about 2.5 feet high, and I enthusiastically walked to the back of the restaurant, to the pantry area, and I did a 360 view of everything in the room, and I came back to the kitchen where my father was, and I told him, oh, we don't have any tomatoes. And he then grabbed me by my right ear and literally dragged me the distance from the kitchen to the back pantry on my feet and dropped me off in the pantry room in front of a box of tomatoes. And he looked at me and he said, you have 4 eyes and you can't find the tomatoes. And he took the tomatoes and he went back to the kitchen. But what that little lesson taught me forever was that there has to be a solution. So what he taught me was just figure it out. Yeah, so there's a great photograph at Elmy's Café. So when my father was the first to come in our family to America, and he came as part of the Bracero program, which was an agricultural workers program established in the United States with people from Mexico, with migrant farm workers that would come seasonally to pick produce that, in the southern states. And my father, who came from a town called Oxkutzcap, Yucatan, came and, picked produce in Texas and in Arizona and in Southern California, and eventually made it to Northern California.
I come from a very small town, Akil. It's close to Oxkutzcap, when Tommy is. I met him when I was 15. He was 18. Yeah, and then it started on. It passed like 3 years, I guess. Then we got married. I went to live in Oxkutzcap. Oxkutzcap is Tommy's town. And then, very soon, one of his friends said, let's go to the Bracero. They training people, they need people because of the war, no people to work. So they start bringing people to Mexico. So a month later, we were married. He came for the first time, not to San Francisco, to Texas, Austin, Texas, and started working there. The first contract maybe 6 months. Then you have to come back. Your contract is finished, you have to go back home. But then they renew. They call the people and they say, you want to come back? We have another job. So he started coming because of this friend, and he liked it. He just go home every year, couple of months or 3 months, and then come back here, come back. But I get used to.
And eventually, to cut to the chase, had a relative here in Northern California who got him a job as a dishwasher. And from washing dishes, he worked his way up to becoming a line cook at a restaurant here in San Francisco.
So he went and started washing dishes. But he's very fast, so he finished right away. But he was looking at the preparador and the cook, and he was saying, and he says, I learned to cook because I like to eat.
He fell in love and found his passion, and that drove him to eventually want to start his own business, a little restaurant, a little cafe, be what it may. And he eventually, with my mother, opened up a small place on McAllister Street called Elmy's Café.
And then I didn't know nothing about cooking, except in the house. And you have to help me now. You know, you cannot pay so many people. Okay, he bought this place with probably not too nice thing. But we stayed 3 years there. And then you have to work. So I used to get up at 5 o'clock and just cross. We have an apartment here, and crossing in front, it was the restaurant, the little coffee shop. So in my just bathrobe, I crossed. Yes, that's right. And open it, and then I fix the coffee, the pancake things, set it up. Then I go put my uniform, and then I turn the light. But the breakfast, I don't know, miss breakfast, just the coffee. We have the counter full. 10 cents the coffee, 12 cents a donut. And then it started making the lunch. 89 cents for lunch.
Now, I have no recollection of that, so we have some pictures, hopefully, but I have no recollection of that. They somehow found our location where we are today at Tommy's, here at 5929 Gary Boulevard, where we've been for the last 60 years.
So, but then he wasn't so happy. He said, I would like to have a restaurant. Okay, that passed some years, 2 years or something. And then this friend told him, Tommy, as a restaurant, I think it's good, it's on Gary, but they closed. And then when they closed it, and Tommy came and he said, why don't you go to ask them, the owner? And the lady said, I cannot give it for rent because I have a lease with them, that I can sell the building. And Tommy said, the building? Where can I get the money? Oh my God. No, if you make the payment, you have friends, they can lend you money, and the co-workers, you know, it was, I don't know how many were. And then, I have some money saved. And another one, Tommy, I have some money saved. And we make the payment. And then, the rest, little by little, wasn't easy, you know.
When my father came to this country, he came by himself. He had left his family in Mexico. He had left my mom. And at that time, I mean, I didn't exist, so I don't really recall anything. But my oldest sisters were in Mexico as well. And my father came strictly to work, which was a very common thing for all immigrants that came to this country, right?
I didn't like it, but what can you do? In those times, more the woman is in the house, or the house. Then I started having the babies. Candy, he was home. That was very nice.
The idea was to try to save money, send it back home, you know, try to have a better life. Now, in the 50s and 60s, it seemed to have been a little bit easier for immigrants in this country to eventually apply for residency. And my father did that. He applied for residency, and he eventually was able to bring my mother and my 2 oldest sisters to America. Now, I was quote unquote born, and yet I had 2 other siblings, my sister Candy and my brother Thomas, that remained in Oshkoshka because we didn't have the resources to bring them over.
And then before Tomasito, then invite me to come here. He said, I want you to come to the United States. Very nice, and the food and this and that. So, okay. So my sister-in-law fixed everything, the papers. We went to Merida, got the papers. I wanted to come to lead the tourists, you know. It's just going to come for visit, is what I thought. So the agent in the consulate says, where is your husband? Because I said, if I know, I could say I was single. But I didn't know. I said, are you married? Yes. Where is your husband? He's in the United States. Oh, your husband is a resident, and I'm not going to give you tourist paper. You're going to be a resident. My God, no, I'm just going to make 1 month, 2 months. I don't need it. No. I thought it, was a bad thing, but it was a favor. And you go to San Isidro, and you get your paper there. Can you imagine? I said, still will find around. But I'm so glad now.
So I am growing up as a little person, and I know my sister Teresa and Elmy. And then one day, my parents tell me, oh, and this is your sister Candy and your brother Thomas. And they just got here from Mexico, and they were like grown, larger individuals and older than I was. That was a little bit of a surprise, but a little bit of a unique childhood experience. We all ended up going to school in this country, starting from grammar school at St. Monica's Catholic School, and then to Catholic high schools, and then to universities. We're the first generation in our family to make it to university, and I'm very grateful for that. And that definitely shaped what we did, but it was the hard work ethic of both my parents that I think have laid the groundwork for whatever success you want to call that my brothers and sisters and I have had, and very grateful for that. And here I definitely remember being a little boy and being 6 years old, being dragged to the pantry. Also remember that at the entrance of the restaurant, we had a jukebox. And that was the only reason I loved coming to the restaurant, was to listen to music, not to work.
We put it over there. So for a long time, yeah, people like it. And even couples come together, the music first, then the order. But here we have it for a long time.
Mexican songs and some rock and roll, right? What was popular at the time. And that actually brought me more satisfaction than grating cheese or, sifting through pinto beans and deboning chickens. So it's very interesting to have one's life defined by agricultural products. But when I was a very young boy with my brother Thomas, many times we would find ourselves needing to clean the pinto beans, right? So even though we came from the Yucatan and the bean we used was black bean, that was very foreign back then in the early 70s. We would use black beans for our meals, but literally the color was off-putting to Americans at that point in time. And so we used the more common pinto bean. And at that time, when you bought pinto beans, pinto beans had a lot of rocks and a lot of dirt with them. And it was my brother and my job, one of them, to sift through pinto beans and try to remove as much of the debris, the dirt and the rocks that we possibly could. And invariably, more often than not, unfortunately, a guest would find, a clump of dirt in the beans or a rock or something, because it wasn't a perfect science. And today, I'm grateful that triple cleaned pinto beans exist, and I no longer have to do that. And then grated cheese, well, we would, and we still continue to buy blocks of Monterey Jack cheese and 40-pound blocks, and we would cut them, but 40 years ago, 45 years ago, we would grate them by hand. And I have grated tens of thousands of pounds of cheese by hand as a little boy, and I'm grateful that today we have a machine and I pay someone to do that today. So, but definitely of an affinity and an appreciation for cheese and triple clean pinto beans that remain to this day. I can cook. but I can't cook fast and not cook for many people. I can cook for 2 or 3 people, but when you see a bunch of tickets on the line, it stresses me out. So I'd rather make a lot of drinks.
Well, I think one of the key hospitality traits, and Julio does this really well, is no matter how busy you are as a hospitalitarian yourself, or in this case with Julio, no matter how busy he was, when he was talking to you, it was as if you were the only person in the room.
My forte seemed to have been also a little bit with people and treating the guest and welcoming the guest. So, but yeah, we all did, as a very common immigrant, first generation family in America, everybody worked at the family business.
He was still a baby. It's Julio. Yeah, because he at that time, maybe open, they running around here.
I remember vividly, we have this open kitchen that looks out into the street, and as a young person, your parents teach you, don't jaywalk, don't cross the street unless the light is green. And here I'm trying to escape not coming to the restaurant and going across the street to the playground to play. But I almost invariably have to walk in front of the restaurant, and at any moment my parents can see me and hey, call me back, come in here and work.
Told me, I would say, oh, study here, do this, do that. Just for fun, because nobody was here, no clientes. So they used to do that. Even when they grew up a little bit more, they all went sit across the street. And Tommy says, I'm not gonna tell you, go to this school or go to that school or do that or no. If you want to go to school, we're gonna try to help you. Sell me something. You don't have to work in the restaurant. Yeah. But come here. And we have boards here. After the restaurant, you have to sweep and you see this? You're gonna do that. If you like it, no education, nothing, you show them everything. And he used to put some money. And then when they try to learn, they see it's money there too. Everybody was happy. So it's up to you. So everybody went to college, went to this. It's not gonna, it's up to you. So they did. I don't think they did bad.
After high school, I eventually went to the University of California at Berkeley and studied political science. My dream and goal was to be a diplomat or something in that regard. When I finished university, I applied for a State Department job. It was during a time, during the Reagan administration, when things in this country were a little bit difficult and there was no work. My father would always say, you do whatever you want, but if you're not doing anything, you are working here at Tommy's. And indeed, that turned out to be my fate, and I hated it. I hated working at our family business. I hated and resented giving service and offering service, and I resented it so much that I tried to find an area in the restaurant where no one would see me. And that was our bar, because the bar at Tommy's has always had a wall that literally separated the dining room from the bar. So I felt much more secure being around the bar area where fewer people could see me than being in the open dining room. But that allowed me to find a passion that was directly linked to our business that I could somehow, work with or be part of, that made me feel more part of the business, and then in turn allowed me to take whatever skill I learned from that and be open with other guests and talk to them about, in this case, tequila and the experience that I had had. And that greatly helped me become, I think, a a bartender that is empathetic and listens and executes what his guest demands.
First of all, Julio is Mr. Hospitality. I don't think there is a better person than him, that he really does everything to make sure that you are well looked after. From a customer point of view, to a friend, to everything, he will organize trips. He's got so much energy, so much love, so much passion. It is overwhelming. You know, I love Julio to bit. You know, and I respect the man. I respect him for who he is and what he is.
Well, I made my first cocktail when I was 14, probably. And at that time, the bar at Tommy's was like a bar, like every other bar on Gary Street. We had a little bit of everything from vodka to sloe gins to whiskeys to liqueurs of all different colors. We certainly were not focused as we are today. And the first cocktail I ever made, my father taught me how to make a Manhattan in a coffee cup. You know, we would get police officers that would come in to have lunch and that wanted a cocktail. And I remember my father telling me, "You're gonna make this," and he didn't even say cocktail. He said, "You're gonna make this drink, and I want you to chill a saucer or a coffee cup. Okay, chill the saucer, and then you're gonna put this, this, and this, and you're gonna put it in the cup and serve it with the saucer like it's a cup of coffee." Okay, I mean, I had no idea what a Manhattan was. I had no idea what the history of the drink was, what the ingredients were, that it was made this way or that way. I just did what I was told, and it seemed strange that I didn't put two and two together, that there was something that may not have been right about doing that, right? I just, you know, this guy, that's how this person drinks whatever it is they drink, let's get it to them. But that was the first drink that I made. Needless to say, thank God Tommy's did not become the home of the Manhattan, or I'm glad we went in another direction. God, I remember when my father actually started the restaurant with my mom, it was a little bit more of like a Hofbrau style. They had roasted meats, and only because at the restaurant where my father had worked, a restaurant called the Bighorn, that's what they did. And he saw that people liked it, and who doesn't like roast turkey and roast beef and this and that? And so he started doing that here, but slowly he started incorporating very commercialized Mexican dishes like enchiladas and tostadas and things like that. And I just remember my sister saying, "Why don't we cook food that we actually know how to cook and that we're, you know, more experienced with?" And slowly but surely the menu started shifting a little bit from selling just American food to selling some commercialized Mexican food to eventually selling more specialized Yucatecan food and things that we were really much more familiar with. And it gave us a little bit more authenticity, but the drink program really didn't start, you know, till, I mean, we were making margaritas like everybody else with triple sec and sweet and sour and mixto tequila, you know, and the revelation of learning about 100% agave really was the monumental stepping stone to starting a bar program focused on not only 100% agave, but cocktails made with 100% agave. And in particular, you know, the margarita, you know, having access here in Northern California to good ingredients, not only just tequila, but like the advent of agave and its commercialability and having fresh produce all year round was relatively simple, coupled with the fact that we had a competitor down the street that made margaritas with fresh lime as well, but just with triple sec and again, mixto tequila. And so, you know, luckily the barrier was fairly low and we could learn and adapt and improve, right? So. Even before I was quote unquote legal to make drinks, I was making a zillion margaritas, blending them up with fresh lime, no agave, just triple sec and simple syrup, but fresh lime, and making what we thought were very delicious and thirst-quenching margaritas that people seemed to love because we were selling pictures of them in big, giant coupe glasses, you know, with salted rims. But again, the introduction of 100% agave through Herradura really opened up my eyes as to the flavor variety that there was with this particular product. I mean, I had no idea what Valley agave was, what Highland agave was. The only difference I knew was that there was a stuff that was regular tequila, and we had this 100% agave. And it was monumentally different. I don't know how I convinced my parents to let us change our well, because the first monumental step I made as someone with responsibility behind our bar was to change our well tequila. And by then, we had been using Sauza Hero, which, as I remember, tasted fairly good for a mixto. I mean, it's 51% agave, 49% other sugars. And back then, the other sugars were sugar cane. It wasn't high fructose corn syrup. And it tasted decent, and it certainly made a solid margarita, right? But again, when I'm introduced to 100% agave and made the same blended margarita the way we were making it with Hero and this, it just was an eye-opening experience. And then coupled with the fact that being in Northern California, you know, in the early 80s, as the health food industry is growing and expanding and organic and natural products are taking a greater foothold in the marketplace, someone comes and introduces us to another kind of sugar, a sugar from an agave plant, right? I mean, agave syrup. I mean, back then we would even call it agave honey, which, you know, it's obviously not honey, et cetera, et cetera. But that was another monumental stepping stone, because now we had a sugar source. Even though it was quite expensive, it almost seemed very natural to make this agave-based cocktail and use an agave-based sugar to complement it, right?
The Tommy's Margarita is the only margarita that I will personally make. I'm not going to do it any other way. And little side story, while he was developing that, or after he had developed that, he would taunt and tease the rest of us, because he would say, okay, so what's in a margarita? And we did, oh, you know, at the time, you know, orange juice, triple sec, whatever it was. Nope, none of those things. If you were to think about the purest form and you're using tequila, what would be in it besides the lime? And we were stumped, because none of us knew that agave syrup even existed, right? And then when he, you know, hit us over the head with the mallet and said agave syrup, and all of us was like, boom, mind's blown. You know, it was, of course, make it simpler.
But it was basically luck that led the creation of the Tommy's Margarita. And in fact, preaching to the choir and with all my, you know, respect to Dré Masso and Henry Besant and Dom Costa and Giorgio Fada, neither did my father or my mother or my siblings ever name the cocktail that we were making at our family restaurant the Tommy's Margarita. That was Dré Masso and Henry Besant and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we just called it the margarita that we make, and the place happens to be called Tommy's.
I kind of made it my business to spread the love of this newly discovered Tommy's Margarita. And I remember going to some of my favorite bars and asking for a margarita, but then also asking the bartender to make sure they used 100% agave tequila, because that was pretty much the Julio way. And then no triple sec, squeezing the limes fresh a la minute, and then using a syrup that wasn't common at the time, so Agave Nectar. And I knew that a lot of these bars didn't have agave, so I would make a point of sourcing it and taking it with me and then dropping it off at these bars and then just asking them to make almost like a daiquiri, this new variation of a margarita, and calling it the Tommy's Margarita. And we very quickly started to see bars in London fall in love with that cocktail, place it on their menus, and that's become a global thing.
You know, our weapon of choice behind our bar is the Mexican elbow. And in every Mexican home, there's probably one or two of these of various designs and shapes. But this is integral in everything done in Mexico in terms of cooking. I remember being asked one time to make some margaritas on stage for a famous performer, and it was Sammy Hagar. And, you know, Sammy told me, hey, just be careful. The pulp of the lime bothers my throat. And, I mean, his instrument and his weapon of choice is his voice. You know, the Mexican elbow is a single press, and it creates very, very little pulp, right? In comparison, when you use a commercial citrus juicer, you produce a lot of pulp that we would have to strain. So in actuality, this thing, which actually takes a little bit more effort, for us is much, much quicker than any machine. This little thing is our moneymaker, right? And this is our livelihood. And there's no substitute for juice. And I know there have been many studies of people squeezing juice before, letting it sit, and doing this and that. And I don't know, you have fresh juice? I think you'll want to have fresh juice forever. One of the things that I'm a little bit proud of as well is starting to serve tequila and leaving the shot glass and the cognac snifter behind. So in Mexico, the traditional vessel was the caballito or caballo. It's a 60 ml serving vessel in a V shape, right? Which, as we remember, you know, vaqueros or charros or cowboys in Mexico would always be drinking out of the tip of a bullhorn, and the tip of a bullhorn was pointed, and you know, because of its inability to be rested, right? You can't put a bullhorn down. You know, that tradition of shooting the entire thing and passing it along came about. And a lot of people would drink tequila this way, but it was you couldn't appreciate what you were drinking, right? I mean, if you want to get drunk, sure. And so in Mexico, when you went to a finer establishment, you got the infamous cognac snifter. And as we know, the design of the glass and, you know, the innate ability of this glass to concentrate too much of the alcohol to the nose made it not a great experience for the person drinking. And so when I started here, we certainly were pouring 2-ounce portions like we do today, but we made our clients drink it in tasting glasses, in ISO tasting glasses. And, you know, people would order a shot of tequila, but when we gave it to them like this, it made them hesitate and stop and actually take a little bit more time. Certainly a lot of people just downed it, but some people didn't. And some people started smelling the glass and just appreciating more the spirit. And eventually that would lead us to developing our own glass with Tony Abou-Ghanem and David Grapschi. We designed the Tag tasting glass that we think is a beautiful glass that's almost universal for spirits. But in the case of tequila, it really allows us to look at the raw material, to look at agave, to look at whether that's highland agave or valley agave, and how the wood, if any, influences the aroma and bouquet of the product. And it's not to be pretentious or anything, but to give the spirit its due. I mean, we want to believe here that we're serving you products that are well made and made by people who care just as much as they're served by people who care. And the added 2 seconds of maybe holding it in your hand and appreciating it brings, I think, a value and experience that should be cherished and enjoyed. I mean, as cliche as it is, life is short. And if you're lucky enough to drink something nice, drink it out of a nice vessel as well. It took the American guest a while to go, wait, that's a shot of tequila and it's in a good glass, a real glass? Yes, right? And today, I mean, you know, tequila shares a much loftier status than it had 40 years ago, and well-deserved, I'll say, and deserve to be considered among the great spirits of the world, like cognacs and armagnacs and scotches, etc., and whiskey. So it's been a good evolution, and we've all learned together.
25% of all cocktails made around the world are tequila-based, so some kind of margarita. There's an incredible figure that I've come across in America every hour. They're enjoying 185,000 cocktails on average every hour. So it's a nation that loves tequila, and it's certainly here to stay.
In 2001, I had the distinct pleasure of really getting to know Tom Estes and traveling to London and having Tom incorporate us and others into the largest meeting of tequila producers in the world outside of Mexico. And it took place in London and in Paris, and it was with President Vicente Fox of Mexico when he went to the UK and the EU to sign agreements recognizing tequila's denomination of origin. And luckily for me, I had become friends with Tom Estes, and Tom Estes is the godfather of tequila to Europe, and not only a dear, dear friend and a person who we miss every single day, but a great visionary. And there, you know, he hosted everyone at his venues, and one of my responsibilities was trying to talk to bartenders about tequila and its versatility. That would eventually lead, so that was in 2001, and in 2003, the National Chamber of the Tequila Industry would name Tom Estes Ambassador of Tequila to Europe and name me Ambassador of Tequila to North America as probably as a reward for what we did in 2001. But honestly, both Tom and myself thought that it was deserved. There were very, very few people at that moment in time that had any kind of reach that were doing significant work with tequila, not only in terms of just promoting it, but also selling it and bringing that culture to a wider audience. Now, when that happens, you know, I took it as a personal responsibility to try to represent as much of the industry as we can. And the way we decided to do that was I decided to try to carry a product from every distillery that exported to the state of California. Now, in the case of distilleries that didn't, then we would buy a contracted tequila from the distillery just to say we have something from that house. Now, we never guaranteed people would buy it because, you know, the marketplace decides that. But I'm still very grateful and thankful that today, with a couple of exceptions of products that are very difficult to get, we represent almost everyone, good, bad, and ugly. You know, and if you have infrastructure in the tequila industry, you own a distillery and you export to California, you can find one of your products here. Maybe not every one, but certainly one. And I think that's a very fair way to approach the business. It's not just a distilled spirit for us, it's much more of a cultural part of Mexico that again, even if you don't drink, you should learn a little bit about tequila. When we started to stock more than the average number of tequilas, and this literally was in the mid-'80s, we went from having 5 or 6 tequilas to having 24 tequilas. I mean, it was like a monumental, stratospheric growth in our selection. The biggest impediment we saw was, how do we sell these things that have no brand name recognition and no marketing budgets and no support of any kind? And while I was at the University of California at Berkeley, there was a bar down the street, a beer bar called Raleigh's, that had a beer around the world club. And there, if you drank every single beer on their list, you got a free hat, then you could get a free t-shirt, and you could get more prizes. And I copied that. But I did it I was trying to be more convenient and not, and I told my guests, and by this time we now had 48 tequilas. And a bunch of them were mixtos, all right? There was a little bit of everything. And I made a little club where you just had to try half of them, 24, and we would give you a t-shirt, right? That said Tequila Master. And it failed miserably. It failed for years. No one would join. We gave away the memberships. And then one day, a regular customer came in and said, hey, that little punch card you gave me? I threw it away. Can I get another one? And I was angry. I go, this guy threw this thing away. I mean, it took me a long time to think about it and took me effort. And I go, it's $10. You want another one. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, I don't want it anymore. And I go, great. Someone was sitting next to him and said, oh, you have a club? And I go, yeah, kind of. And he goes, oh, and it's $10 to join? I'll join. And I go, what? And then suddenly, when someone showed interest and someone graduated, and by graduating had drunk the half things, we decided from that first time, not only would we give them a t-shirt, we made a kind of a cheesy diploma, but when other guests saw this recognition, then it was like a virus. People started joining and graduating, and we started to create a culture that would last to this day, where, we do little interesting things, like at the bar, when you order something different, we just put the bottle in front of you to stimulate conversation. Like, why is that guy drinking that? Or why is she drinking this? Or what's that? And that really helped us not only move those brands, but introduce brands that had no recognition among our guests because there was no marketing, to people learning about smaller brands and wanting to try them. And that little club eventually would develop to have various stages where, the first part is a drinking card. Well, we give you a free t-shirt and diploma. There was actually a segment of guests that wanted to drink, but wanted to learn what they were drinking. And that was monumental because these were consumers. They weren't professional people. And so what do? So we come up with an idea of, okay, we'll give them an exam. And then they still wanted more. Okay, well, let's go visit distilleries. So we started taking people to visit distilleries, and that would also lead to me taking professionals to visit Mexico. And we were lucky enough to take some incredibly influential people on their first trips to Mexico, and that would spawn people from wanting to do it on their own and do it themselves. And it actually, the greatest contribution of the London bartender was telling America that if we are traveling from such a long distance, we understand we're on your dime, but we want to stay 3 extra days on our dime and do whatever we want to do. Like, that was unheard of in America. And you guys totally revolutionized that and allowed a new growth to happen, and for people to experience more than the standard, the 2-day tour to one place, right? And that was groundbreaking. And it created in tequila something that I had not seen before, And this is probably because of experience, but if you sell something that's good, you have no competition. People may prefer it or not, but you have no worries, right, if it's good quality. And what we saw was companies not necessarily being friends, but saying, oh, sure, go visit Johnny. I think my product is just as good as Johnny's. And then try them side by side. And people gained the confidence and started to also go, oh my God, I would like, Dré to visit my distillery too if he's here, right? And that grew everything, and it was a benefit for everyone. But that's thanks to European bartenders, expanding that. So that was great. That was cool.
We would go to visit Julio there, and of course he had his Bachelor's of Tequila program and his Master of Tequila program, so we learned. And then our back bar would change because of that. So at that time I was really, really hungry for any information regarding any kind of spirits whatsoever. But to have the ability to take a deep dive into tequila in San Francisco was amazing.
One of the things that we've done for years, but we've never said it, is if you come with a group and you're gonna have more than one, you should literally drink something different. Because again, we make a standard house Tommy's margarita out of a Valley style reposado tequila, and we think it tastes really great, but it may not be your favorite flavor profile. Here, what's really interesting about the work we do is we allow the guest to shake and smell any bottle he wants or she wants, because there is a strong correlation between the olfactory and what things taste like. And if you love the smell of something, there's a great chance you'll love the Tommy's made with it as well. And that exploration is really what's key. When someone asks us, what do you recommend? Well, that's based on the individual and what his or her preferences are, right? Again, more plant-driven, wood-driven, earthy, fruity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We would really love to make everyone the Tommy's margarita that they love, not that we love, right? It's not about us, it's about the guest. So finding the perfect tequila for them is our hopefully the journey that we want to take people on. So we started infusing tequila many, many years ago, pretty much before it was fashionable, but we did it. We wanted something unique, but we also wanted something that was kind of just mind-blowing and unforgettable. So we started infusing tequila with habanero, but to a point where in many ways it is probably unsafe, but we tell people not to drink it, and we warn people, and we have documents that you sign if you want to drink it. But there is also a segment of the population that thinks that there's no such thing as pain and that it's all pleasure, and that experience of pungency through spice is great. And so here we make spicy margaritas that are kiss of spice or kill you with spice, make you cry, or not, right? And as you tell me you're from Goa, I got you. You eat Thai chilies all day, I'll make you cry. Anything in between. And it's really a radical way of making a spicy margarita because, again, because we infuse the tequila, by controlling that amount of tequila, we control how spicy you want it. So you want it undrinkable, we'll make it with 2 ounces of pure habanero tequila, and it's probably undrinkable. You want a kiss, we put in a couple drops, right? And it's just faintly numbing, right? And anything in between. And it's a different experience. And we call it Lazarus because you could be dead, and it's like that Pulp Fiction adrenaline shot. You're like Lazarus. You wake up from the dead, you drink this. I unfortunately am a romantic, and I am a very stubborn person. And once I know what I want, I try as much as I can to get it. And I fell in love with my wife the very first time I saw her, which was about 29 years ago. We've only been married for 18 years. And I saw her, and I was already dating someone at the time, so I obviously couldn't do anything, but fell in love with her and then proceeded to ask her out on dates for 13 years in a row when I was single. So it wasn't 13 consecutive years, but whenever I was single, and I was rejected every single time. I couldn't invite her to coffee, to lunch, dinner, movie, walk in the park. No, nothing. And finally in 2005, I was on the way to making a life-changing decision, and I wanted to find out if my wife had any interest in me. So before I made this life-changing decision with another person who was great, I went to ask my present-day wife if she had any interest in me. And having been rejected for 13 years in a row, I'm a confident person, but it's brutal, right? And so I walked into her office and I just decided, just put it on the table. I go, would you like to have lunch with me? And Lily said yes, but again, having been rejected for 13 years in a row, I turned around to see who she was talking to, because she had never said yes to me in my life. And luckily for me, there was no one in back of me. So I go, oh, are you talking to me? And she said yes. And so I asked, well, I'd love to take you to lunch. I'll be in Guadalajara tomorrow. And she goes, okay, I'll meet you there. Tell me where. And so I invited her to a lunch, but based on I had a business meeting the day of the lunch, and I asked, I was very new to Guadalajara, and I asked the gentleman I was having lunch with, hey, where should I go to lunch? I want to impress someone. And they gave me the names of a couple of restaurants. And one of the gentlemen at my meeting was a chakra expert from Italy. And he asked me, he goes, oh, okay, and where do you want to go? And I go, well, they told me these 3 places. So he gets out the chakra tongs and he bangs the table with them, and he passed the tongs over each of the names of the restaurants that I was suggested, the 3 restaurants. And over one restaurant, there was a big reaction, and he goes, you should take her there. And he goes, write your name and her name. And he, hit the tongs again, and they were apparently doing something good. And he goes, I don't know, this looks okay. So we go to lunch to this Argentinian steakhouse. And, I wasn't in the mood for small talk. So I go, hey, do you have a boyfriend? And she goes, no, I don't have a boyfriend. And she goes, do you have a girlfriend? I go, yes, I have a girlfriend. You met her. I just brought her a couple months ago. We had visited with some tequila masters. And she goes, oh yeah, she's really nice. And I go, she's lovely, but I'm gonna go break up with her. I'd like to date you. And my wife goes, well, why don't you talk to me when, you're not dating anybody? Okay. Had lunch, took her to see Carlos Santana that night though. That made a big, strong impression. And then 2 weeks later, I flew to London, broke up with my girlfriend, who was a wonderful person, and then came back and asked my wife if she would go out with me. And she said yes. And then I proposed on the 2nd date. So, yeah, so very blessed. But my wife is very stubborn. I love her, but she's stubborn, very. And she's amazing, and she's obviously, the love of my life. In our family, my father did all the cooking, and my mother's responsibilities. I mean, she also, I remember vividly her making a lot of breakfast, but my father did all the cooking. And it was just something that he truly loved. It was so incredibly ironic that my father loved cooking so much that he hated to go out to restaurants and order food. He was the person that if you ever went to a restaurant and someone's order got fouled up, it was always his. And because of that experience, he almost hated going out because he would always say, you know what, I just want to eat what I want to eat, and I know I can make what I want to eat. And even though he would, you know, you go to the restaurant and as basic as when the server asks you, would you like a glass of water? And hopefully the server asks you, would you like ice or no ice? And he'd say no ice, and he'd get water with ice 100% of the time. Or, you know, you order your steak, can I get it medium rare? And it'd come super well done all the time. So he'd just say, you know, you guys eat, do whatever you want. I'll make my own food at home the way I want to make it. But my grandmother, Chichicandita, was a great cook. So was my mom's mom, Chichibina. But I think my father learned to cook a little bit from his mom, and also learned, I mean, he learned quote unquote technique at the restaurant at the Bighorn where he worked as a line cook. But there's an innate ability, in my opinion, between people from the Yucatan to cook that is truly blessed, because today in the city of San Francisco, there is almost probably no restaurant you can go to where there is not someone doing the cooking who is from the Yucatan. So in general, people from the Yucatan love food, have a good sense of sazon or flavor. And I think my father had that as well. And he did all the cooking. And I mean, in fact, my father was famous for, you know, if you ever had the luck of you telling him you were going to the Yucatan, he would do one of two things. He would give you a box of crap to take to somebody that he knew there, or he'd give you a side of beef to take on your plane. And then I remember giving our attorney a whole roast beef to take on the plane, and he didn't tell our attorney he was taking a side of beef. He just said, here's a box, go deliver it to this guy in Mexico that was gonna pick you up. And then my attorney went, or our attorney went, takes the box, lands in the Yucatan, and he goes, I went to give the box to the guy and the box is bleeding. And like, he's all freaked out. He goes, no, there's just like a giant prime rib in there. There wasn't like a dead guy or something like that. But I mean, my father would send chainsaws with people, whatever, because back then imported products in Mexico were difficult. But anyway, the food items were just classic, And you know what was fascinating, my parents, I don't know how, but they instilled in me my love and desire of travel. My parents were unfortunately unable to go to school for a long time. You know, we kind of joked that, you know, my father got as far as the 4th grade in grammar school, you know, because of conditions and circumstances. And for some bizarre reason, he always wanted, and with my mom, to see other things and meet other people. So they traveled incessantly and went literally everywhere. And they would come back with postcards and pictures and tell us that they met these people here and they can't speak their language, but they somehow became friends. And my mother would write letters in English or Spanish to people that spoke neither, and yet they still maintained a friendship. And I really love that. And getting to meet people and different people really has inspired me to try to go everywhere I can. And you know, bartending and the Tommy's Margarita and Tequila have really allowed me to do that. And again, forever grateful for that. And that was all through my parents. And just being taught respect of every single culture. And, you know, you can be different with everybody, but share many things in common, whether it's eating or drinking, right? And that should bring us together. We would call my father a little bit of a philosopher. He could say things that seemed hurtful, but he was really trying to teach you great lessons. Like one of my father's classic sayings, I remember as a little boy, he would tell me, you know, he would ask me something and I would say something preposterous or incorrect or wrong. And he would look at me and he goes, "You don't even know your first name, right?" I mean, implying, God, you're dumbing up, get smarter, you know, and things like that, that really, you know, in my particular self helped me because, you know, it's that whole thing when you start speaking with someone, if you actually say what comes immediately to your mind, you may disappoint not only yourself but others. If you actually think about what you're gonna say and try to respond just by waiting 10 more seconds, you know, it's usually better. Or his advice, you know, I always wondered, how does he keep his marriage, you know, intact? He works all day, my mother works all day. They have 5 crazy kids that, you know, and they don't really have time to go see us play baseball or basketball or be in our activities because they work all the time. And yet they manage to keep their family together. And you know, one of the things he would say is, like, especially with my mom, like, if my mom wanted something or needed something or said something that he didn't agree with, he would grab a glass of water, and as he's hearing these things that he doesn't agree with, he would drink the water so he can't say anything and swallow the water. So then when he actually swallows the water, you know, he doesn't yell and explode and say things that will make the situation worse, right? But little things like that. And I mean, it was truly amazing how hard of a worker he was. I never heard my father say he was tired till he was about 78 or 77 years old, right? He said, "No, I'm not tired," right? Never. And little things like that really stuck with me. So I was coming back from downtown after running some errands, and I had called the restaurant to find out where my father was, and I was told, "Oh, he went to pick up your mom." And as I'm driving down 24th Avenue, I see that the truck is in the same place that I had parked it. And I go, "That's interesting. They just told me my father went to get my mom, but the truck's right over there." So I go around and to the restaurant and go around the block again. And I come back on 24th Avenue and then notice that there's an ambulance with some people in the foyer of an apartment complex. And I stopped there and that was my dad. I mean, I was shocked and I mean, didn't know what to do. I came immediately to the restaurant and I called my mom and my sisters. And I hadn't, at that moment, I didn't say anything to the staff because I didn't know what to do. And we didn't know, you know, I was told by the ambulance, "We're gonna take this gentleman, your father, to X hospital." Okay, so I wanted to go to the restaurant because there was no one there and we were technically open, or just our team was here. And back then, this is 12, 13 years ago. So, you know, there would have been a bartender, there would have been a cook, and there would have been my father. So dealing with whatever. And so I came to the restaurant to assume his role, even though normally I would come into work at 3:30. And I got a hold of my mom and relatives and they came, and obviously they went to the hospital and I stayed here, and we still didn't tell anybody. And when my father passed, we didn't say anything till the next day either, because we were kind of in shock and didn't know how to respond and what to do. And I mean, it was very surreal. My father had had a heart attack and collapsed at Tommy's like a year, or I'm not sure on that timing, but at the restaurant, and that was frightening, but he survived. And so it wasn't, you know, I mean, it was a big deal, but it wasn't like this. And obviously we hadn't seen him. What had actually happened, he was walking to go pick up the truck that I had parked, and then he had a heart attack. And so someone got him. I never found out who. I never found out how we got to where he was. Someone helped him, and then someone called the fire department and the ambulance and all that, because we obviously weren't there, but that was dramatic. And I will say, as a young person, you complain a lot about a lot of things and this and that. And that's the day I stopped complaining about my personal things, was the day my father died. Just, whatever. It can always be worse. So. I tried very unsuccessfully to fill the shoes of my father, but it's very difficult because, I personally look at him as a very omnipresent kind of individual. He had a very big personality, and he loved Tommy so much that this was literally with his family his whole life. And I love Tommy's as well, and I'm deeply passionate about coming here every day, and I enjoy being here every day. But there are occasions when I would love to be in London, and I'd love to be on a beach, not very often, but it is not, 100% of my life. But every night when I lock up the restaurant, out of respect, we say Sama Jefe, which is good night, Jefe, and to my father here. I do. It's Mayan, for essentially good night, boss. I mean, Jefe is not Mayan, Sama is Mayan. But, both my parents spoke Mayan. Unfortunately, we weren't taught Mayan. I wish I spoke Mayan, because it's certainly part of our culture and heritage. And I've been really, amazed that, my dishwasher will tell me, hey, every once in a while things fall off the shelves and you can't figure out why, or someone hears something. And we've also had guests tell us that they've seen my father, even though they know that he's no longer here. So it's nice to hopefully still have him around. Sama Jefe. I was actually very sad, well, obviously when my father died, but I was kind of looking for the quote-unquote sign from the departed to tell you that, hey, you're doing a good job, or you're doing a shit job or something. And I heard nothing. I mean, no dreams, no noises. Like every night when I'd say Sama Jefe, I want to hear a curtain move or some shit to let me know, right? And nothing happened for years and years. And someone told me, it's because things are okay. And I go, okay, all right, I'll buy it just for peace of mind. And then finally, after years, I didn't quote unquote see him or hear him. I felt something, and it was a feeling of satisfaction. And it's weird to explain because I don't think a lot of things made my father very satisfied when it came to the business. But it seemed like, I had personally the approval, or whatever you want to call it, from that. And it really helped me be at peace with myself and continuing to run the business, or try to run the business, and continue the work that my parents have done.
I mean, first time I met Julio was in the late 90s. And he came with his, at that time with his girlfriend. He's not well dressed, but then we know Julio, But he had that great smile. He had that great approach, that when he's introduced himself to me, he said, Maestro, my name is Julio Bermejo, and he brought me a gift, and the gift was this cup that I still use today. Especially when I do homework, and when I decorate, it's my cup. And So he brought me a cup, which was Tommy's restaurant, and the logo in the front,
Yeah.
and then my name on the side, which I thought that was very cute.
Nice touch, yeah, that's very
And
Julio.
but I could tell he felt a bit uncomfortable. He didn't know, the lanes for the library bar, an iconic bar of the world, And I said, "Come with me, don't worry, I'm gonna make you feel." And I took him to the Cupid corner, right?
Yeah.
And I gave him a time of his life. And we became to be friends, So every time I got to know him more and more and more, and I got to know the man behind the person that we all know. And then with Thomas Margarita, you could tell the way he thinks, the culture, start to think about, again, the sweet aspect of the agave, and the beautiful thing, and how humble he is. For anyone around the world who does not know Julio Bermejo, you need to meet him to understand the person that he is. Has un cuore, it's got what do you say? He has a heart, it's bigger than a house,
Yeah.
and his family has. And I love him to bit. If anyone talks bad about Julio, they better watch it.
So the evolution of the Tommies takes a couple of steps. But the first monumental step is, again, the literal change from regular tequila to 100% agave. Today, it doesn't seem important, but 40 years ago, 39 years ago, it was monumental because the public even America didn't understand what 100% agave was. What I did understand was the cocktail was dramatically more delicious. So we start making the margarita the same way, but with 100% agave. And then with the introduction of agave, there was another significant flavor change in the cocktail again. And the cocktail became smoother and more agave focused. Now, I can say that now with accuracy, but back then, we just said the cocktail got better, so we didn't really know if the guest would notice a difference from the change in mixto to 100% agave. And remember, this isn't a blended cocktail, right? So when we're getting dilution from water, etc., and the customer could distinguish it, right? And then the addition of, or the substitution of agave for simple sugar and for triple sec really kind of defined the margarita a little bit more, made it more intense and more flavorful. We didn't know why. So it was really fascinating because, blending a drink and having that much water, you almost don't think you can taste the base spirit, and yet you could. And it got more and more defined with the addition of agave. As we carried more and more tequilas and our back bar grew and it looked more impressive, 99.9% of the margaritas we were making were with our house tequila, and people loved it. People were very hesitant to order anything else in the margarita because there was still no culture nor understanding that the Tommy's margarita was a plug-in recipe and it would taste of whatever tequila you put in it. And so I started experimenting by giving guests, try it with this, try it with that. And again, blended, people were blown away that you could taste a difference. That difference was accentuated when we start switching from making the Tommy's margarita blended all of the time to now part of the time to eventually the opposite. Today, maybe 10% of the margaritas are blended and 90% are served straight up or on the rocks, right? And it's come full circle. And today, without a doubt, if we make you a margarita with Altos Blanco next to Tezon Blanco, you can taste the difference. You may not be able to pick out which is which, but you'll go, these are not the same. And likewise with reposados, and likewise across brands and across portfolios. And that's been, for me, the most influential contribution of the recipe is that it's a plug-in, and that your margarita is defined by what you choose to put in it, right? Today we're filming on a day of record heat in San Francisco. It's gonna be 90 degrees today. So today, you know, literally the margarita made with a beautiful Highland Blanco that's crisp and bright and refreshing is perfect. If you were in my neighborhood, the Richmond district, on a normal night that's foggy and cold, you want a little bit more body, a little bit more mouthfeel and finish. So that's why we use a reposado or use an añejo, right, for that purpose. But that versatility for me has really made almost a bigger contribution to the versatility of tequila in this cocktail.
Julio has this fascinating, phenomenal way of joining the dots in hospitality. He's great at remembering names. I've not seen anyone as good as him, and there's an example that I've shared with friends before, that during that time that I was helping him here in 2003, I remember being sat at the bar and a couple walked in who hadn't been here for 21 years, I think it was, and had only been here once, and he remembered both of their names, and their jaw dropped to the floor in surprise. But he wasn't surprised himself. It kind of just rolled out. But he's great at. He has a gift for remembering names. He has a gift for joining people together. I remember seeing that at the bar, where he would introduce different people at the bar that were sat on their own, and almost like coordinate these people, knowing that they had something in common. No matter how busy he was, squeezing limes or taking an order or cashing off a check, once that door opened, Julio would look up and say, "Hey, thanks for coming." And likewise, as the guests left the building, he heard the creak of the door and looked up and said, "Hey, thanks for coming, see you next time." So this wonderful acknowledgement. He oozes natural hospitality. He's a master in that, and there's a lot to learn from him. He makes you feel very special.
I wish I had bartending mentorship and training. No, we didn't. It's so funny because our style of shaking, we use the Hamilton Beach 809 blender top as our cocktail shaker. And remember, we used to blend every single drink we made. And I personally found it very impressive to go to a bar where you could order one blended drink and they made you one blended drink. I go to bars all over the world where I see people ordering blended drinks, and there was always a residual in the blender. And then when the person was asked to make another cocktail, it was like Solera method. They would dump shit on the stuff that was left over and make you another drink. And here, we would make you one blended drink or two blended drinks or a pitcher, and it was exact. I mean, we're obviously measuring, but we measured, right? And we didn't want to make you a drink and a half or a drink and a quarter. We wanted to, because the balance of the drink would be thrown off. And again, it was really powerful to come here and order a blended pitcher of margaritas, and the bartender would make the drink. Many times it was me. I mean, back in the day, it was basically me. And you would order a pitcher, and I would just grab the pitcher and just invert it into the glass pitcher or serving receptor, and there's nothing left over, right? I make the right amount because that's my job. But as basic as that sounds, it was uncommon. But from blending all of these drinks, the switch to making the drink on the rocks, we didn't have cocktail shakers. I just make it in the blender because you can make 4 of them, right? And having 2 blenders is much easier to to mix the drink, then shaking the daylights out of it. You know, I mean, we would later find out that it's a total riff on, you know, a Cuban throw in some respects, right? But with ice and everything. So we're aerating everything. And it was just faster and easier and more convenient. But crucially, you know, when the guest ordered a Tommy's with a different tequila, we always washed the blender. It wasn't, you know, like when someone grabs a jigger, pours Midori, then they set the jigger down and then they're pouring whiskey in the jigger and then they're putting chartreuse in it. No, we always cleaned it, and that was important because we didn't want influence from anything else, right? But yeah, throwing the margarita between the pitchers was key. I mean, and then making one margarita, again, we take the Hamilton Beach Bar blender top, we put in, I mean, since we have the experience and want to think we know what we're doing, we pour tequila first, we pour a cup of ice into the blender to start dilution, then we add agave, and then we finally squeeze lime to taste in a 2-1-1 proportion. But again, since limes are a natural product, we may adjust the lime juice less or more depending on size and acidity, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we were very blessed for over 20 years that when I was basically making every margarita here at the restaurant, where our relationship with our fruit and veg or our lime purveyor, it was O'Lippy & Company, they would literally allow us to handpick every lime we bought. And for more than 20 years, we did that until Mr. Lippy, the owner of the company, passed away and sold this company. And then we lost that privilege. And what would happen is, you know, here in San Francisco, the wholesale produce market would open at around 1:30 in the morning. So I would go at around 1:30, 2 in the morning and pick the limes for the week. Now, it would take me 2 to 3 hours of literally taking an 18-kilogram box of limes, inverting that box, inverting another box. So I had now 2 empty boxes, and hand-picking every single lime. And we were picking limes with thin skin. I didn't care how ripe or unripe they were, because I was picking enough limes. I was picking 30 to 35 cases for a week. I would pick the lime at the produce market, bring them to Tommy's, and then we would re-pick them on what was ripest for that day. Since we're using the Mexican elbow and just squeezing once, you know, it looks easy when the limes are ripe. And it's very hard and challenging work if you don't do that. You know, when we cut our limes, we cut off the nibs so that when we apply pressure on the Mexican elbow, we're squeezing on pith and not rind, so we minimize the amount of oil that we squeeze into the drink. And then we actually put the lime back together once we cut it in half to try to minimize oxidation. But there's nothing in the world that can substitute for fresh juice. And we still choose to make our Tommy's margaritas with fresh juice. Right? That's the only way we know how. Yeah, well, so it was necessitated by the fact of the switch from the blended Tommy's to the On the Rocks Tommy's. So we had been serving, I mean, it looked really beautiful when you blended a Tommy's and you served it in a giant coupette margarita glass. I mean, there was something about it because it was tall and huge. And it's the logo that we still use today, right? We just don't use those glasses because with ice, that glass became very impractical, and the tall center of gravity, people were knocking them over, and so we moved to the goblet that we use today, the 10 3/4 ounce goblet that we have, and it's been perfect. And luckily, because the restaurant's been here so long, we are allowed to place glassware above the heads of the bartenders. That's no longer legal in the state of California, but we're still grandfathered in with that. I'm grateful for that. If not, we wouldn't have any room for any glasses. But yeah, it's iconic. It's a fair-sized cocktail. Yeah, so our agave, we buy totes of agave or drums of agave. A tote is a 500 kilo massive container of agave, and then or like an oil drum of agave, right? Food grade plastic, but of agave like that. And it comes at a bricks level where we have to cut it at least 1-to-1 with water. And we will bottle that in our house tequila bottles because those are the bottles that we have the most amount of. And generally speaking, they're round liter, bar bottles, so they're easy to manage and all like that. But yeah, that's agave purveyors. There are now many in Mexico and from many different states. And it's a matter of if you have a relationship with someone and you like someone's quality. It was really scary when it started because there was only one person or one company that sold agave, and you didn't know if they're going to go out of business or they're whatever, whether shortage or not shortage or whatever. Today that's a solid business in Mexico for several people, and it allows the Mexican states that aren't in the denomination of origin region, so they can't make tequila or mezcal, but they grow agave. And again, you don't need you just need an agave with a lot of residual sugar to make agave, and you have a business. And it's not obviously not used just in cocktails, but it's a sweetener that's used in many, many industries, and it's low glycemic, and I think it tastes delicious, and it's widely available now. So grateful for that. Yeah, I love tahini. I'm not a big salt person. I'm starting to get, I don't mind putting tahini on every rim now, just because it's tartar. I think salt is too powerful. Like a half salted rim, great. I don't think you need it. Generally, no. Yeah, generally, no. Taste the tequila. We'd like to say that we'd rather you taste the tequila because presumably we're using something good. I feel very, very lucky to be able to pour what we want to pour and not what we have to pour. And we also feel very lucky that I don't have to pour a lot of things that maybe the public may be drinking, but I don't think are good enough.
In my opinion, the bartender is the new concierge. They're the ones that people will wait to get to the bar so that they can make that reconnect with that person that they've seen before. The bartender is the one that can steer them in a direction, whether it's visiting another place or a cocktail that they may enjoy based on the questions that they've asked. It's about that connection.
It's fine because at the end of the day, our biggest concern is hopefully making a product that our guest feels that he or she would like to come back and enjoy again, right? That is our biggest standard. Does someone like it and do they come back? That's what makes me happiest. And knowing that I'm trying to sell things that are well made, regardless of whether they're understood or not. The decision to change, again, 39 years ago from mixto to 100% agave, when in this country, 98% of consumers didn't drink what we were offering them, right? No one drank 100% agave, right? We wanted to serve them that because that's how tequila was originally made, and they deserve to drink something good. We can always have something cheaper in our well that is 100% agave, but we don't. We try to focus on naturally hydrolyzed and distillery owned and operated as much as we can, right? And those stands, though maybe meaningless to 99% of consumers, I think resonate with people who care, right? And we're trying to show our guests that we do care in this area.
Well, whenever anybody says, do you want to go to Tommy's, the answer is always yes. I live in Napa now, which is an easy hour-plus drive, and I still go there on a semi-regular basis just because, you know, it's Tommy's. And it's legendary. And there's been so many great conversations that have happened at that bar. So every time I go back, it's a flood of memories. You're always greeted by the family, because I've been there enough, they know my name, but behind me comes somebody who maybe hasn't been and they know their name too. So it's a neighborhood place, but yet it's international. So it has that wonderful dichotomy of feeling like home to people all over the world.
Yeah, I've been really surprised because again, no one ever thinks of trying to make, or you don't purposely try to make an impact on anything. You try to make things better for yourself and your local area, your community, your whatever. And sometimes you're so close to it that, again, in our case, it took people like Dre and Henry and Dom and Giorgio and many others to tell us that we're doing good work. We think we're doing something good because our business is growing and our guests are happy and they come back. But to actually see the drink or a dish or whatever on someone else's menu, where someone takes the time or someone comes up to you and says, oh God, I really enjoy the cocktail. It is mind-blowing. I mean, mind-blowing. I took my mother to Cape Town in 2015, and we walked into a bar where we had never been, either of us, before, and I'm pretty sure no one knew who I was. And I took my mom with me physically to the bar, and there are these two gentlemen there looking at us, and I go, hey, can I get a Tommy's Margarita? And they said, sure. I mean, they didn't bat an eye, they didn't go, what is that? I'd have to Google it. And my mother almost fainted. I can't believe it. We're in Africa and halfway around the world, and this person knows what it is.
People from all over, even they send us, look what I saw. I was on vacation here. And they send it on the phone, and oh, that makes it nice. I don't know, where in London or something. We went, and she sent us, he knows this bar, go to this bar, or go to this one. And we went once, but they didn't say order this or order that. So we sit down and this and that, very nice. And I ordered a margarita. And then when they brought it, I said, no, I don't like it. I don't like it. And pretty soon he came. So he came, did you order a margarita? Yes, but not the same. Did you say Tommy's Margarita? No. Okay, that's why. And he went and asked for the Tommy's Margarita. That was okay. I said, no. And like you say, a lot of people send us notes they saw in some place far away.
On my travels, I've seen it in China, in Japan, in Africa, all over Europe. It's become a modern-day classic. It's overtaken the classic traditional margarita, if you like, and along with a small handful of other neoclassics like the espresso martini and the bramble and the treacle, the porn star martini. It's now becoming well understood by the general public. It's a great cocktail to make at home, only 3 key ingredients, but it's certainly here to stay and still my top go-to cocktail.
It's really, wow. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So, but I mean, it's kind of like, I now jokingly say that Tommy's is like, there was a casino in Las Vegas called the Mirage, and their tagline was, global from one location, you know, in Las Vegas. And so I like to say that Tommy's is kind of global, but from here in the Richmond district in San Francisco. And it's nice, but very grateful.
Tommy, maybe you happy. Tommy? Yes.
Sama Jefe,